Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to introduce the special issue of the Russian Law Journal, published very recently. It's volume 7, issue number 3 for 2019. It happens to be under my guest editorship, but the idea of the topic very much belongs to the editors themselves. It's devoted to legal integration in Eurasia. So let me take you through the contents for just a moment. There are a number of articles by Russian scholars, by Ukrainian scholars, by foreign scholars. I think you'll find something for everybody in this particular issue. We begin with a theoretical or philosophical essay devoted to the thinking of the American philosopher John Rawls and the reaction against that philosophy as represented by approaches to Russian integration, the Russian approach to Eurasian integration. That's followed by an article on the macroeconomic coordination of the Eurasian Economic Union, strategic aspects. So it takes an overview of the general overall approach to economic integration. That's followed by an article on the public-private partnership in Russia and other countries. This, of course, is an approach to a combination of the private sector and the public sector that is widely used now throughout the post-Soviet republics, but also Western Europe and the United States. It's become a very fashionable approach to combine public investment with private investment and a sharing of the risks that joint investment necessarily involves. That's followed by an article on the legal status of the child in family legislation of the Russian Federation and other countries of the CIS. We sometimes forget that integration occurs when it does at all levels of the legal system, including the interpersonal level, and family law is a very good example of where that is fairly advanced when it comes to legal assistance treaties, for example, or analogous legal instruments. That's followed by an article on international law in Russia, in Ukraine, in Belarus, modern integration projects. These three states have very similar but nonetheless slightly differing approaches to the interface between public international law, international treaties especially, and their national legal systems. It's a very interesting piece, and I think public international lawyers will find it of particular interest. That's then followed by an article, an extremely authoritative piece on the Court of the Eurasian Economic Union, because one of the co-authors of that article is a judge on the court herself. And she comments on the differences between that court as it was initially conceived and that court that has now been reconceived to some extent, or in any event at least revised in approach. And that is a key integral part of any approach to economic integration. You need not merely the legal infrastructure, but you need an application of the rules of the legal infrastructure in order to make something real out of the original infrastructure relationships. That's then followed by a comparison between the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union. Comparative perspective. They share certain aspects in common. They differ in other key aspects, including the role of the court in both systems. And it likewise is one of the most original pieces, I think, in this particular issue. That's followed then by an article on the Eurasian Economic Union Court and the World Trade Organization dispute settlement procedures. There is, of course, an interface, sometimes antagonistic, sometimes complementary, between the World Trade Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union, and this article explores some facets of that. The issue concludes with an article on what you might call the jurisprudence of the court of the Eurasian Economic Union in the past 7 years, since its formation in 2012, right down to the present time, with a critique of some of the cases that have come forward through that court. I think that likewise is an article that is extremely important and will be very revealing to the readers of this particular issue. So I conclude with commending this issue to your attention. I think you'll enjoy it very much, and my gratitude to the authors for inviting me and honoring me with the position of guest editor of this particular occasion. Thank you very much.